So good morning to all of you all today. And I think we are live now, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Gretchen Hunt, and I am the Executive Administrator for the Metro Louisville Office for Women. Our office was founded in 1991, and since the inception of the office has worked to elevate the status of women through education, advocacy, and legislation. And we have 7 areas of focus. We focus on gender-based violence, which is one of the topics we're going to be talking about today, human trafficking, social and economic well-being of women, housing, education, civic engagement, and autonomy. And the way that we do this is by convening people together, convening women in the community, convening communities that are most impacted by these issues, convening government, corporate, nonprofit, faith, organizations and leaders to address these issues together. And the reason we called this kind of quick conversation this morning is because there has been just a tremendous amount of violence in our community that is impacting individuals, families, and communities. And we know that there's a great need. I think that when we first looked at planning this, it was even after the rise in domestic violence homicides that has been publicized since last week. Since then, we've had more community violence. We've had a police shooting. We've had just 2 days ago another tragic school shooting. So really, the palpable feeling in the community is one of just a lot of pain and trauma. And so, we in government are here to serve people. And we are here to make sure that individuals and communities know what resources are out there and that people are not alone, and that government and the community care about the well-being of all of our citizens, and that we understand that there are a lot of nuances for the way that different communities experience these issues and different barriers that people face in accessing resources. And so at the Office for Women, which is an office of one. So while my lived experience may not reflect all of those experiences that communities face, there are great partners within Metro and partners in our community who both have lived experiences that are different from mine, and also work in community and work in ways to address a lot of critical issues facing our community, and on healing and trauma and peace and services. And so I'm really excited to be joined here today by some of my colleagues, both in Metro government and outside. And so I will give them an opportunity to actually introduce themselves. We will be in the Facebook Live after this is recorded. We will be sharing it with a few more resources and a little bit more background on our presenters. But I want to open it up, and Nanette, I'm going to go first to you. So if you could explain a little bit about who you are and what your role is with the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods.
Okay, my name is Nanette Dix. I am the program manager for the Trauma Resilient Communities Project and its expansion. So we do everything trauma related, and we try to work on the micro level. We work with individuals and families that are dealing with trauma. On the meso level, we work with community members and different churches and agencies to make sure that we are working on trauma resiliency and creating a common trauma language and trauma practices. On the macro level, we're federally funded. We get a lot of our money from SAMHSA, from the American Rescue Act, and we are making sure that we are looking at trauma through the lens of an individual, and then also what we can do for trauma. And I have a background as a therapist, as a trauma therapist. I have a master's degree from the Kent School of Social Work that specializes in substance misuse disorder, trauma, grief, and mental health. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Nanette. And we may have an opportunity later to also talk a little bit more broadly about what all the services are and all the different projects that Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods has, because I think that, the community doesn't necessarily know how much you all do to keep everyone safe and to build strong communities. And so we definitely want to uplift the great work that's being done all across Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. Next, I'll turn to Jadora Park. So Jadora is one of our partner agencies, the Center for Women and Families, and that's an essential partner in the work that we do here at the Office for Women. And so Jadora, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and what you do at the Center for Women and Families?
Thank you, Gretchen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jadora Parks. I am the VP of Programs for the Center for Women and Families. I also have a background in mental health counseling. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I have over 6 years of experience being a licensed therapist, and I also own my private practice in the community. So I'm a community clinician as well. At the Center for Women and Families, we are a trauma-informed agency. We support individuals, families, and communities affected by intimate partner and sexual violence. We offer services, a variety of the services that I know that we'll talk about soon later on in this panel discussion. But we are a 24-hour agency, so we have our crisis line. What I do with the center is I make sure that I meet with community members, I meet with community survivors, I meet with different areas to just help bring us together and help spread the word that their survivors are not alone, to bridge the gap, close in the gap, to make sure that people feel supported no matter where they are in their journey of being a survivor. So overall, that is my job.
And Jadora, you will probably talk about this more, but and I should say this, so while the Office for Women has the mission of elevating the status of women, we know that when we focus on a lot of these issues, what ends up happening is that this also impacts and raises up gender diverse individuals, men as well, who've experienced a lot of these issues. A lot of the reason why the Office for Women was created was to shed a light on some of these issues that you might say are gender-based issues, but they definitely impact men and gender diverse individuals. And so we hope that this program, we know that there are men in the community that are hurting and gender diverse individuals who may be tuning in, and this is absolutely a space and information that is for you. So Jadora, do you just want to also explain who's served by the office by the Center for Women and Families? Pardon me.
Absolutely. I always tell people, do not let our name fool you. Even though it is the Center for Women, it is also the Center for everyone. So we serve everyone, no matter your race, your gender, your sexual orientation. So please do not hesitate if you're a man or a woman to seek help. No matter what, we serve everyone. So just because our name has women in it does not mean that we do not serve men. That we do serve everyone.
Thank you. So I think just to start it off, if you all want to set the stage a little bit for, why it's important for us to talk about these issues, both community violence and gender-based violence, and how that may impact different communities differently, how these conversations can happen, and what we need to kind of be talking about when we open up these conversations. So either Nanette or Jadora, whoever wants to start.
What I would say is that the reason why we need to talk about it is because since 2001, domestic violence has went up 200%. Just think about that, 200%. And it could be due to the pandemic. People are closed up, and then also me and Jador just was talking about how that compound trauma can cause a lot of, acting out, abuse of the loved ones, because you have a COVID happening, then you have a lot of racial trauma happening, and then on top of that, all of, this community violence is happening. So it's a special molding pot for what is that combustion that we see, especially in the African American community, is the high rate of domestic violence. It's because you go and you hurt the person that's closest to you because you're angry, because of it could be some underlying adverse childhood experiences, some underlying trauma that you don't even know of, and you're reacting. And it's easy to react to that person in your household. You're mad, you're angry, and there's he or she is. And they're the easiest person to get to. So you see a rise. And I think it's a rise because of a lot of different combinations.
Yeah, I second that. I think we were talking about how the trauma, just community violence and domestic violence, and we never had for the past couple of years we haven't caught a break between the school shootings and the shootings that are happening in communities and grocery stores and the rise in domestic violence homicides and the civil unrest. It's just there's a lot of trauma and it's compounding and it's overwhelming and people don't really know how to deal with that. And survivors feel alone. And so part of our goal is to let survivors know that they're not alone, that there are people that will help them, that will walk their journey with them. There's no judgment, no shame.
Mhm.
We get it. Like this is a really trying time in our community, in the African American community, but just in our communities alone. A lot of the violence is definitely unnecessary, and I think it does not help people's overall arching mental health. It doesn't help. There are other things, as Nanette was saying, that they may have going on. There are other traumas that they've not dealt with appropriately. So it doesn't, it just bubbles over. So part of our goal as a community is that we need to come together to bridge that gap, offer more community resources, offer the survivors just a listening ear. And that is what our crisis line is for.
Yeah. And like George said, when you think about the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, our mission is to decrease the risk factors for the families and individuals that we serve. And then, you know, decrease the risk factors and increase the protective factors. And then you have to look at every, when you look at domestic violence, when you look at violence in the street, and you look at trauma, trauma comes in just like grief. There's that denial phase that this is even happening to me. That's that anger. I'm angry that this is taking place. And we see a lot of anger, especially in the Black and brown communities, because you can't even walk into a grocery store without being traumatized. So that when you have that inside you, it's going to come out. And if you don't have great coping skills, that's when you see that rise of domestic violence. You start to bargaining. If I do this, maybe this will change. Then you come into that depression mode. And then accept that this is our fate. And so you see that trauma narrative, working with the trauma, you can see that same narrative play out in grief, because it is grieving. We are grieving. We're grieving for a life that we thought we were going to have. We're grieving for opportunities that we thought we were going to have. And it seems like we're going back in time instead of going forward. And that makes for a lot of people to get angry, and hurt people hurt people. And unfortunately, they hurt the people that they love the most.
Nanette, can you share what are some of the protective factors that prevent community violence and prevent interpersonal violence?
I think a protective factor is allowing folks to understand and that they have a safe place and a non-judgmental place to come to and talk. Uh, we did what we call a mass mailing, where we sent out these cards. And the most of the calls that I got was from African American men talking about their hurting. you know, I'm hurting. This one man called me and he was talking about that he had been released from prison for a few years and he's just trying to get himself back on track. And he wants to bond with his daughter. So he had a lot of that depression. He had a lot of that anger. He had a lot of, just denial of, why is this life like this? And then also that acceptance that I made a mistake. I served so many years because of a mistake that I made. My daughter doesn't even know me, but I want to take advantage of that. But I feel so depressed right now. Can I talk to somebody? And it means a lot, especially, me and Jador could tell you, it means a lot in the African American community for men to come out and say, I need to talk. So that window is opening, and we want that window to open more and let people understand that you can come and you can talk to us. Non-judgmentally, we're going to listen to you. And and those protective factors are what we as a community can do. We can open up our arms and say, come in. You know, the Mayor Fisher is all about compassionate cities. And here at the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, and I know also for the Center for Women and Family, we're all about that connectedness and the Office of, Women. We're all about coming in and holding. If we're gonna meet you where you are. If you don't want to talk right now, that's okay. This door is always open and it's never gonna close. So getting first that first protective factor is knowing that you have a place to go and that door is open.
I second that. I also think that so many victims have been silenced for a very long time that they are afraid to speak up, that they have reservations, rightfully so. If you've been silenced, you've been controlled, you've had things in your life where you're not able, you've been judged, you've lost friends and family members. So a lot of people are afraid to speak out. A lot of people are afraid to get help right away. And so part of that is just allowing them to know that it is okay. It is okay to get help. It is okay to seek a listening ear. And that it may come with time, right? So it may be that someone will call and just want to know that someone's going to pick up the phone every time they call. And that's what we're here for. It doesn't matter if you call at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. We're going to pick up the phone no matter what. We're going to be there available for you whenever you're ready. And sometimes people think that they're ready and then they have a change of heart, but we still give them the steps no matter how many times they call us. So I think also being aware that trauma affects people in a variety of ways. And so sometimes they hold that in. Sometimes it comes across as anger or hostility or, resentment or feeling like they're failures or maybe not low self-esteem. And we have to work on the whole person, not just the victim that is leaving the domestic violence situation. We also have to build them up because they've been torn down so much.
I'm so sorry. I second that emotion because a lot of times when we think about trauma, we think we're living in this by ourselves. And then we're taught to be resilient people. We pose this as women, we could take some stuff on. Life comes through us. So we're supposed to be able to take some stuff. And then sometimes we take so much and we don't want to talk about it. We won't, sometimes we have this Cinderella situation for ourselves that if we can, and then we love to change people. Like with time, things will change. So a lot of times it's like, okay, this is going to change. This will get better when we move over here. This will get better when we do this. So a lot of times we feel guilty as women and as partners. And I'm not just going to say talk for women. I want to be universal. When we're in intimate partner relationships that are, violent in nature, sometimes we take on guilt ourselves. Maybe it's something that I did. Maybe something I said. I know that he or she was having a tough time over here. So maybe it was that, we don't want to wrap that denial comes in place, that this is not really happening, that this is going to change. Or we're young. We got married young. We're young in this relationship. So it's a growing pain. And then a lot of times it's normal. ACEs is normal. Adverse childhood experiences is normal. So a lot of times if we see domestic violence in the household as we grow up, it becomes normal. This is just what love is to us, some of us. This is what's happened. It happened with my mom and dad. So, it's love. And we don't understand that it's not until we get to the point where sometimes it gets so heavy that we can't hold that load and it's tough to be resilient. And sometimes we're tired of being resilient. We want to exhale and just lay back and just float on some water. It's so hard to always be resilient.
Jadora, if somebody called the crisis line, I think sometimes there's confusion about what that means. I know I got my start working at the Center for Women and Families as an attorney representing immigrant survivors and also some U.S. survivors. But a lot of times there was a lot of fear about picking up that phone. I don't know if this means that police are going to be called. I don't know if this means I'm going to lose my children. I don't know if this means that I have to be ready to leave or get a divorce. I still have mixed feelings. I still love the person. I just want the violence to stop. I don't know if this person will speak my language. I don't know if they will judge me because I'm not out yet in my community. I don't know if it will result in retribution. I mean, there's so much that goes into picking up that phone call. And yet, in my experience, picking up that phone call is sometimes a lifeline, even if somebody's not ready to make a decision. So can you just kind of walk us through, like if I were accompanying somebody, a dear friend, a colleague, because domestic violence cuts across all groups, all social strata. There are judges that are survivors. There are people that are survivors who are working in all areas, all parts of our community. What would that look like if somebody calls your number today, which is 581-7222? We'll share resources at the end of this. We encourage you to plug that into your phone, share it with people you know. But what would happen if someone called just after this session today or during this session? If somebody just is listening in and saying, you know what? I heard Nanette say that. I'm tired of being strong and resilient. I need to unload some of this right now.
My motto, and Nanette and I were talking about this as well, it's okay to not be okay, right? It's okay to finally get to a point where you don't have to be strong anymore and you need someone to just help you. And it's okay to not be okay. And so if you reach out to the crisis line, you get a non-judgmental person on that opposite end. That person is not going to judge you. That person is going to meet you where you are, whether you are just wanting resources, whether you just want to vent and say, I'm going through this horrible, terrible situation. I'm not ready to leave yet, but I just want somebody to just to listen to me. That's okay as well. We listen. It doesn't always have to be a I'm ready to leave right now situation. Some people are not ready to leave right now, and that's perfectly okay. But we safety plan with the caller on the other end. We ensure that they have the resources available to them when they're ready. We walk them through what things look like, whether it's to file an EPO or IPO. We walk them through what it looks like to come into shelter or when they're ready, what that looks like, alternative housing options. So it doesn't also have to be in an immediate danger situation. I think sometimes people think, oh, I can't call the crisis line because I'm not in immediate danger. That's not true. You can call the crisis line no matter where you are in your stage of being a survivor. If you're not ready, it's okay. We will not force you to be ready. We will always answer no matter when you call. So I think that's important to tell anybody. But if you are in immediate danger, absolutely call us. We make sure to safety plan with you. If we need to, if you're in danger and we need to, we'll collaborate with police officers to make sure that we get you to a safer place safely. That's okay too. But please, I tell people, don't fear that we're going to take your kids away if you're going to call the crisis line. Our job is not to take anybody's kids away. Our job is to keep you safe. Our job is not to, I know some people fear the police and not want the police involved. If we respect that for the many reasons. If they don't want the police called to their homes and we feel like we can safety plan without being able to do that, we try to do that. However, I cannot guarantee that if someone's life is in danger, that we don't try to call the appropriate authorities to because we're on the phone and we need someone. If someone's in immediate danger, we want to make sure that we safety plan with them and get them out of that immediate danger situation.
One of you raised the issue of being afraid of contacting the police, and we know that where people lived experiences is really different about that, right? So I remember working with women who were living in the East End, white women who might live lives of relative privilege, but they were afraid of calling the police for different reasons. But we know that communities of color, immigrant communities, have had a much different relationship with law enforcement over time, may be afraid, and then. So it's really important to know that people don't have to call the police to call you to get services. If they want to choose to call 911 or call the police or do that, they can. but that the center is really wraparound services. Nanette, do you want to talk a little bit about, I think people often think about things like domestic violence and we may think one response, the criminal justice response. But when you're talking about Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, there's a lot of different responses to community and interpersonal violence, right? So can you talk a little bit more about what services trauma resilient community has in terms of counseling, or even the ambassador training that you do to empower community members to really be protective factors for the community? So, looking at that more broadly, that these are community issues, they're not just law enforcement issues. Can you talk a little bit more about Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods?
Yes, the Office of Safety Healthy Neighborhoods is growing. Like I said, I am the Trauma Resilience Communities program manager, and this it started with a 5-year grant from SAMHSA, a recast grant, and it was because of the social unrest because of Breonna Taylor, the death of Breonna Taylor, and everything that went on, and then COVID hit, and so it kind of changed. Our goal is to reach 400 and children and families by year 5, which the year 5 will be next year in 2023. We do racial trauma therapy, which is offered by the Collective Care Center with Dr. Nifley. In 7 counties, we do AFCBT, which is Alternatives for Family and Children Cognitive Behavior Therapy, which was designed by the University of Pittsburgh. And we're in the trainer-trainer model this year, where they're training folks clinicians that are at 7 counties how to train people on these different modalities. So this year of the grant, the year 4 of the grant, we're really focusing on getting those 400 people, because we got a little deficit in that because of the COVID and how things ran with COVID. We see an increase in need. I'm sorry, these earphones are sliding off my head. We see an increase in need of it. What we're doing with the expansion, because of the great work we've been doing in the community, we have really we got 4.5 million to do expansion from the ARP money. So with that, we're placing clinicians in the neighborhood places. So there'll be a clinician at Bridges of Hope Neighborhood Place, which is in Park Hill, South Central Neighborhood Place, which is South Central is over there by I forgot where it is. I'm sorry, it's over by Hazelwood. Then Northwest, which is in Shawnee, and then Newburgh, which is First Neighborhood Place. And then we're going to be also in Firdale. And then we're going to have, they're reopening Shamoli, which was going to be on Shelbyville Road. So we'll have one of the clinicians rotate. So, but if I get more funding, we'll put a clinician there too. So the clinicians are going to be doing everything trauma focused. So we're looking at trauma. What we do here for the Office for Safety and Health in Neighborhoods, we look at from the root to the fruit. So whatever you putting in that root bears that fruit. So what we're trying to do, like I said before, we're trying to pick the weeds out, which is the risk factors, because your fruit can't grow good if you got a lot of mess in it. So we're trying to pick those weeds out. So when them saplings grow up and that fruit grows up, then we will be able to, have a better understanding. So we work with younger people. We're working, now I'm getting ready to start some summer programs that it's all going to be, we're going to do the mind, body, and soul. From the root to the fruit again. And the mind part of it this year, we're going to start this year because it's a 3-year process. It's going to be all around the little kids because of what happened with the school and with the shootings. Kids see what we see. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on TikTok, they're on all these things, and they understand what's going on in the city. So what we're trying to do is give therapy in a way like you give your kids vegetables in a fruity form. They don't know they're getting something that's really good for them. But we're going to be working with Side by Side, who has a bus who's going to go out there and do painting and stuff, artwork, which is very therapeutic. Next year, we'll be doing the body part. So we're going to look at somebody that does Taekwondo. My cousin, she's a psychiatric nurse at the VA in Chicago, and they do that. And it's all about that mindfulness, that centering that in that body. Because if you're dealing with a lot of stress, especially that toxic stress that becomes trauma, you're out of your body a lot. So center you, put you grounded, and get you in there. So it's that body, that movement, and it also it works on other things too, like how you feel and how you act out and different things like this. So that's the body part. The soul part is what we're going to do in year 3. That is all about having a voice, because a lot of times when we're victims of violence or we're victims of trauma, we don't feel like we have a voice. So any way that child wants to bring their voice out, spoken word, rapping, singing, whatever, we're going to have them doing that. So we're doing those things like that. And we're looking at, therapy in different forms, because one size does not fit all. We do have boots on the street with our outreach workers. They work directly with the families. We have our community sanctuaries. So we saw that in when the young man got killed, at 16 years old on the bus stop. We rallied around that community, and we took everything to the community at the local church, and then we invite clinicians in so we can talk to the parents, the community, because we also look at vicarious trauma, because all of us are dealing with vicarious trauma. We're dealing with collective trauma, because we're having compound trauma on top of trauma. And even though, what happened in Texas, what happened in Buffalo did not impact us personally, it impacts us mentally, spiritually, and physically, because it encompasses that trauma and it reawakens that trauma within us. So we work on those. So we're doing a lot of different things here within the Office of Safety and Healthy Neighborhoods. We're working with Dr. Edna Dickey, who's a forensics psychologist, working with 18 to 24-year-olds coming out of Luther Lucky. We're trying to create a program for aftercare program for them. We're also, so again, trying to put those protective factors so they lower their recidivism rate for them going back into prison. Then we're working with kids that are 12 to 24 that could be at high risk of justice involvement, so they won't go to Luther Luckett, so and end up in a penal system. So we're working on a lot of different things here, and I'm excited, and we got wonderful partners such as yourself that's working with us, because it does take a village. It does take a village. So we're excited about the work we're doing here and in the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods.
That's amazing.
It's tremendous work, and I'm really glad you talked about, the upstream prevention, because so often we are dealing with violence after the fact. So many times our response, has been law enforcement or the criminal justice system, the courts, and that's way down the line. And what we know works is that upstream prevention, going back in and figuring out, why are people falling into this river, not just pulling them out of the river, but going upstream and seeing what's happening. I do want to just also allude, because I think that it has to be named, that also the history of racism, redlining, segregation in this city also exacerbate both community and gender-based violence. So we know that when individuals have less wealth, have less options for housing and employment, we know that unemployment is a major risk factor in domestic violence homicides. So I think community really needs to also be aware that those equity issues are deeply connected to what is happening inside of an individual relationship. And as much as, folks in that relationship may try to stop that violence, there's a lot of responsibility and things that can be done on that big picture to work on equity, and that people experience these issues in very different ways. And at the same time, I'm hoping that any, people tuning into this presentation today, this community conversation, can get what they need, because you can still get the information you need, whether you are in that position or whether you have more resources, but you still know that these are resources available to really everyone. Jadora, do you want to talk any about the prevention work that the center does? Because you all also do upstream and try to stop violence from happening in the first place. Can you share some of that you do in the community?
So well, I want to share, if I can, just about our services in general, also our prevention efforts. But I think, as Nanette shared, like some people don't know a lot of what we do. And we are a 24-hour crisis and information line, so you can call anytime, 24/7, to be able to get assistance. We can offer you resources and safety plans. We also have our emergency shelter. Our shelter may be an option for those with high lethality. We provide legal advocacy. The advocates from the center can help you with your EPO, DBO, or IPO in court. We can give you the steps to be able to do those. We offer counseling services free of charge here. So that is an option for clients who want to come in to receive services. We offer medical advocacy. So those individuals that are affected by sexual assault, we help them to be able to get a sexual assault exam if they choose to do so. They can get one at the hospital or here at the center. We offer case management services. Case management provides assessment planning, facilitation, care coordination, just assistance, overall assistance. I look at case management as the umbrella of assistance that someone needs to get them help. We do prevention, education, and training. We help community partners. We have groups, psychoeducational groups that we offer to facilitate. We are opening up groups for Zoom as well as in person. I know the pandemic was hard for people to get out in the community, and people were nervous about that, but we offered them via Zoom. And now that we have lesser limitations on COVID restrictions, we are going back to in-person psychoeducational groups. We have something new, which is called the Parents Empowerment Program and the Kids Club. It's an educational program focused on parents and provides support to parents by empowering them to discuss the impact of violence on their kids. And it builds their parenting skills, provides them a safe place to discuss fears and worries. And the kids get a safe place to discuss their fears and worries too. And we help them overcome that. And so the Parents Empowerment Program is available to parents and children who want to come to that group. We offer transportation assistance for clients who want to come to those services, and you would just call our crisis line to be able to get enrolled in the Parents Empowerment Program or any type of psychoeducational groups, therapy that I've discussed. We service Floyd and Clark County, as well as our additional counties that we serve, not just Jefferson, but we serve Oldham, Trimble, Henry, Shelby, Spencer, and Bullitt County. A lot of people don't know that. So I try to make us aware that we do not just serve Jefferson County. We have a Southern Indiana campus as well. But if you need resources, you just call that same crisis line number.
Thank you so much. And Nanette and Jadora, both of all the services you've talked about are open to the public. They're free. They're confidential. So is that right? I mean, yeah, of course, there are some limits on confidentiality if it's a mandatory report, but confidentiality is really important. We know the community's small. We know Louisville's small. We know we're all connected in some way. And it's important because these issues are ones that people deserve to have, quiet spaces and confidential spaces and privacy. So I think that's really, really critical for folks to know that that you guard this information and that it stays private, because I think, everybody may experience it differently. I also wanted to just let any Metro employees who are tuning in also know that the Office for Women worked in partnership with other folks in Metro, including, of course, the Mayor's Office and the Office of Health Equity, along with the Women's Caucus and folks, to push an ordinance that would grant paid leave to Metro employees who are victims of domestic violence and other crimes. That has just been passed. We're working on the implementation. But I say that to say that that's another support that is in place. So if you're a Metro employee and you have experienced community violence, you've lost a child or a family member to gun violence, or if you are experiencing domestic violence, we really wanted to make sure that there's concrete support, that you can take paid leave to go to the doctor, go to the therapist, call the Center for Women and Families for an appointment, work with Nanette to, go to one of those places. If you do need to go to any court proceedings, that you'd have time off to go to that. It's just another example of how the community needs to wrap around people who have survived violence. And one of the things we haven't spoken to, but is, interpersonal violence or domestic violence and sexual violence that occur in alarming numbers and frequency. So odds are, the number of 1 in 3 women have experienced domestic violence in Kentucky, nearly 1 in 4 men, and nearly half of women have experienced some type of sexual violence. So what this means is that in every setting we're in every community space, in our churches, in our faith communities, in our workplaces, there are people who can use this information and support. Before we close, I want to just share real quickly, because I want to talk a little bit about healing and give you all space to cover anything that we haven't mentioned. But I do just want to share real quickly the resources. Let me just, here are a few of the resources that we've talked about today. The Center for Women and Families and the crisis number. I don't have the website there, but I can also post that. We will also post this in the Facebook Live and in the comments. The Trauma Resilient Community Project, which Nanette has talked about in her contact information. And then Nanette referred to the Collective Care Center, which is at Spalding. Dr. Stephen Nifley and his clinicians were all busy this morning, so they were busy doing the good work of healing racial trauma. But Dr. Nifley has been on another panel that we have hosted here at the Office for Women, and we felt that it was really, really critical to also look at the intersection of racial trauma. So if any individuals have experienced community violence, microaggressions, or something similar in terms of racial trauma, they can also contact to get free services here. And I know that they also are doing work providing that in Spanish. So I know that there's also accessibility there. Whoops, sorry. Pardon me for 1 second. Okay, little tech. So I just wanted to highlight that for folks. Again, we'll share those resources, but there are a number of really good resources out there. The point being that you're not alone. We really want the community and individuals who are experiencing either community violence or interpersonal violence to know that help is available. You don't have to carry this weight alone. And there are many people who care about you and your well-being in this community, and we want folks to know that loud and clear. I want to ask you all, before we open it up entirely to any final remarks you want to give, but can you talk a little bit about what healing looks like? I think oftentimes we talk about the hard parts of this, but can you talk about what healing looks like? Because it's not an easy journey to heal from trauma, but there is light on the other side of this at times. So can you talk about what healing looks like, or what you've seen in people who've moved through and beyond violence in their relationships?
So for me, go ahead, Annette.
You go ahead.
So for me, I think it's good to say healing is a journey. Healing is a process. There is no quick way to get to the end. So you have to be patient with yourself and be mindful that in caring and love yourself and know that you're supported. I think healing is feeling your emotions and allowing you to feel, because oftentimes people are not allowed to feel. They're not allowed to be angry. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to feel those emotions. And so you're able to really just express yourself. You're really able to share your story. You're able to have an empathetic person that can listen to you and provide you reassurance that what you feel is validated, what you feel is real. I think also practicing living a different lifestyle. Most people who are experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner violence or sexual violence, they have lived this in this world where it's hard for them to see what it's like on the opposite side. They've lived in this where they've been controlled for so long that they don't know what it's like to really be free, and understanding that freedom is something that you deserve. It's your right. So be practicing living. What does that look like for you now? What do you want to accomplish now that you're free? I think allowing mindfulness, practicing those deep breathing exercises, healing your mind, your body, your spirit, going on a journey for therapy, because all that stress that you've endured, you you take a toll on your body. So being able to practice that body release, that tension release, that trauma release, that emotional trauma that you've been through. So I think those are just uh, some factors, and having the support of people to be able to do that.
Thank you. Those are good reminders for all of us, I think, who are carrying the weight of Buffalo, Uvalde, the police shooting, the rise in violence, and on in our community. So those are good reminders for all of us. Nanette, what do you think healing looks like, or what does it mean to you?
Well, healing is individual. So healing looks different for everybody. For me personally, healing for me was like Dora was saying, it felt like I was released from a heavy weight. I witnessed a lot of violence as a child because my father had a problem with alcohol and he used to beat on my mother. So all of those traumatic events that I saw really left a mark on me emotionally and physically. So healing for me was hard because you have to revisit that pain that you let lie dormant. But it's like a spiritual awakening because you find yourself in a different light. Like you walk from this tunnel that was so dark into the light. And that light is very light and that light is very precious. And you protect that light. So it is very releasing emotionally, spiritually, and physically because I held a lot of my pain in my body. So it was like she said, it was like I was released into a newness that I never knew I could live like that. So it was, and it was not pain from what happened to me, intimate partner relationships in my life, but it was the intimate partner relationship in my mother's life, that stuff that I witnessed. So that's why I love and I talk about a lot of kids because we can start to, if we start really looking at healing, not only for that victim of violence, but for all the victims of violence, for those kids. Because when I talk about from the root to the fruit, that soil that you put in there because of they witness that domestic violence can bear their roots and that fruit that goes on to be a perpetrator of violence or a victim of, so that cycle continues to go. So that release for me was uplifting to me, but it also was beneficial to my kids. So that's what healing looks like to me.
Absolutely. Breaking the cycle of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual assault is important. Breaking the cycle, because it's not just the person that's living through it that's the victim. It is the kids that are also victims, the family members that had to endure that pain with them, the friends that walked that journey with that person. So, you know, the people that live that life with them, second hand or third hand, being a family member or friend or child, they're all victims and they all need healing. So, and it's okay to grieve for the loss of what you thought things could be, grieve the loss of a relationship, and start the process of creating a new journey, which is a process that you own it. It's your journey. You create it no matter how you want.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit before we go. We talked a little bit about, not calling the police. And sometimes we in the Black and brown community, we have those issues, but that's what stops us because sometimes that could be a barrier because we are getting beat down mentally and physically and spiritually through this domestic violence situation. But sometimes it stops us because it's taboo. You don't talk about what goes on at home. What goes at home stays at home. And then if you bring the police, does that make it worse? Does You know, I don't want everybody now they're looking at me, which I was a victim of violence, hurt and despair. But then this happened, and then now they're not wrapping their arms around me. But so you kind of get afraid to even get help for yourself because what is the outcome of that? What does that look like for my kids? What does it look like for me? So all these things play in our mind as we are victims of the what ifs. And we don't really think about, you know what? I don't care about the what ifs. I need to protect me. And sometimes it's hard for us. It's hard for us to sit there and say, I need to protect me. Because it seems like it's selfish for us to even want to protect ourselves because that relationship has told you you're nothing, you're not going to be nothing, and blah, 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 all these things. But to be able to, that what is, and I would love to have that conversation and victims have that conversation of the whys that they don't, because always people are like, why you stay in that relationship like that? And I wouldn't have done that. You don't know what you would have done because this was based on love. And I still love him. Like my father, I talk about my father's alcoholism. My father was wonderful to us. He was at every event I had in school, clapping, doing this, you know, just happy for his child. But he was a terror when he drank. And I couldn't wrap my mind around it. So my mother stayed because he always paid the bills. He always did this, he always did that. So she took a lot of abuse because it was so loving environment for us, but really it wasn't. Yes, he was there at all the events. But then that event that day, I may got an accolade and I'm smiling and cheesing because my daddy was there. But later that night, he broke my mama's nose. So it's that schizophrenic view of our lives sometimes when we're trapped as, you know, victims of domestic violence.
And Nat, I think that's exactly what, Jodora and folks at the Center for Women and Families can also accompany folks with holding that, all those really conflicting feelings, questions about in my particular situation, given my history, given what's happened before with this person's violence, is it going to be safe to seek court protection or contact the police or do a different safety plan? Because everybody's situation is so different. And so I think, Jodora, I know we're getting close to time, but do you mind just sharing if someone felt that if a friend or family member was in a violent relationship or an abusive relationship, because we're also talking about emotional abuse, economic control, threats, other things that may not be physical, what they might do, what would be helpful, kind of as a takeaway or action point for anybody tuning in who may not be themselves in this situation right now, but may know someone. What are the best things that you can tell somebody that are supportive?
Absolutely. So if you're supporting someone in this situation as a family member or a friend and you don't really know the steps to take, you can always encourage them to call our crisis line. If you just need some guidance on things that you can assist with, you can call our crisis line. Someone doesn't have to be directly in the tornado or in the storm of domestic violence, intimate partner violence to be able to ask questions. So even if you're a mom or uncle and you just need that guidance of what to say to my loved one, my friend, because they're going through these things, please reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we work with you on whatever your need is. So again, whatever part of your journey you want to do, it is your journey, and we're there to walk beside you the entire time.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Nanette, also for sharing your story, your personal story, and giving that gift of insight to the folks that we're talking to. Thank you to both of you for accompanying survivors of community and interpersonal violence, for families, for doing this really good, hard work to make our community safe. Right now, I want to say we will share the resources at the end, but I want to say this is the call to action to our entire community. If your workplace, first of all, take care of your workers today. Everybody's experienced trauma, as Nanette has alluded to, just with everything, the recent events of just the past 2 weeks, much less the past 2 years and the past 200 years in this country. People are carrying a lot of weight. So to be good to folks around you and give them time to breathe if you look at policies, Mayor Fisher urged workplaces to look at policies to grant paid leave for people who've experienced domestic violence and these other crimes. Do look at that. For Jadora and Nanette, I understand, I'm sure that not only just individuals who want to reach out to the center, but if businesses or faith communities, synagogues, churches, mosques want to reach out to you all and say, hey, we would love someone to come and have this community conversation. Is that something too that people could reach out to you all for? Super. We'll continue to have these conversations. We think that, that this is important to keep spreading this information so everyone in the community knows what support is out there. If you are tuning in and you have ideas of other folks you'd like to have us host and amplify the good work that they're doing, let us know. We're always open to that suggestion. But I want to thank you all today for spending the time, given how busy and how important the work it is that you're doing. And I want to just we'll share with the resources here. Let's see, one quick second. Of course, tech difficulties. Let's see. Well, I'm gonna actually share the resources at the very end, and I'm gonna thank our presenters. Again, we will have this recorded. We will share it out through our networks, and it will be on our Facebook Live page, Office for Women at Louisville. If you don't already follow the Office for Women, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so that you can be aware of our events. Lastly, we still have a community survey out there. We will soon be convening a commission on gender equity. Part of that focus is looking at gender-based violence. So we want to hear from you, the community, of what are the issues about gender equity that you think are important? What are things impacting women and gender diverse individuals? What would make this community stronger and safer for everyone? So please let us know, and we'll drop that link in the chat as well. So thanks for tuning in, and be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having
Bye-bye.
us.
Bye-bye.